The alien ship hung above the training field like a floating mountain of metal, its silver hull glowing under the station lights. Warriors from many different species gathered across the open ground, waiting to watch the Krafton soldiers test a strange object they had found inside a human museum crate. The object was simple, old, and looked small compared to the giant aliens who held it. It was a human katana, an ancient sword with a curved blade and a plain wooden handle. To the Krafton, who fought with massive energy axes and heavy armor, it looked like a toy. One of the armored giants lifted the katana high and let out a loud, deep laugh. His voice echoed through the training field. Other Krafton joined in, shaking the ground with their laughter. They mocked the tiny blade, calling it fragile human metal and a souvenir for a child. They said humans depended on machines, not skill. They said no one soft and small could ever use a thin sword like this in a real fight. The tall alien walked toward an anvil in the center of the field. He placed the katana on it as if preparing to crush it like nothing more than a stick. He raised a massive hammer above his head. The crowd leaned forward, ready to watch the old human blade shatter in one hit. But before the hammer fell, a clear and calm voice cut through the air. "Stop!" The alien froze, confused. He turned his large head, and every warrior in the crowd followed his gaze. A small human girl, no more than 11 years old, stood at the edge of the circle. She was tiny compared to the towering soldiers around her. She wore a simple dark shirt, loose pants, and had her hands folded behind her back. Her black hair was tied neatly behind her head, and her steps were calm as she walked forward. She looked like she belonged in a school classroom, not on a battlefield. Her name was Aiko Tanaka. The Krafton burst out laughing again. It was even louder this time. The idea that a human child would dare interrupt their demonstration made them point and roar with amusement. One alien asked if she had lost her parents. Another joked that humans now sent children to do their fighting. Aiko did not react. She did not show fear, embarrassment, or anger. She simply looked up at the large alien who held the hammer and said in a steady voice, "You mock what you do not understand." The laughter stopped slowly, like an engine losing power. The aliens were not used to being spoken to like this, especially not by someone so small. The giant Krafton warrior stepped toward her. His armor scraped loudly as he moved. He looked down, his faceplate glowing red. "You say we do not understand this toy?" he asked. "Then tell us. What value does this thin blade have?" Aiko's eyes stayed calm. "Before you crush it," she said, "allow me to show you." A murmur ran through the watching crowd. Some were curious. Some thought this would be a joke. Others, especially a few humans standing far behind, looked worried. The alien soldier laughed again. "You want a chance to prove your toy is strong? Very well. I will allow it. The crowd enjoys entertainment." He turned to the other warriors. "Let her amuse us before we break it." Aiko stepped forward. She walked past alien legs thicker than her whole body, past armored bodies that moved like metal statues. She reached the anvil and carefully lifted the katana with both hands. Dust clung to the blade, but she held it as if it were precious. The crowd whispered. Some aliens bent lower to see her more clearly. A young technician recorded the moment on a camera drone, not wanting to miss the strange scene. Aiko turned to face the giant alien. "Choose a test," she said simply. Many aliens blinked. They expected fear, not confidence. The leader's eyes narrowed behind his faceplate. "Fine, we will choose a test so clear that no one can question the result." He barked an order, and a soldier brought out a long training pole, a heavy object made from energy-resistant metal, designed to withstand strong impacts. The pole was planted upright in the ground. Even a grown human man would struggle to shake it. The Krafton leader crossed his arms. "Strike this pole. If your toy blade survives, we will allow another test." The crowd whispered again, expecting the sword to snap immediately. Aiko studied the pole quietly. She closed her eyes for a moment. Her breathing slowed. When she opened her eyes, her expression did not change. She stepped closer, raising the katana with both hands. Some aliens leaned forward. Aiko moved. No one expected how fast she was. Her feet barely made a sound. The blade flashed in the air, clean and simple. No show, no flourish, just a pure motion. For a second, nothing happened. The pole stood still, untouched. Then, with a soft metallic slide, the top half of the pole separated and fell to the ground. The training field went silent. Aliens stared, unable to understand what they had just seen. Aiko lowered the katana and bowed. The Krafton leader's eyes widened behind his helmet. His pride tried to push out a denial, but the pole on the ground spoke louder than any words. Aiko lifted her head and said, "Now choose the next test." Aiko walked away from the sliced training pole as calm as ever, but the shock she left behind rippled through every warrior on the field. The broken top half of the pole still rolled slowly across the floor, making a faint scraping noise that seemed unnaturally loud in the silence. Even the Krafton soldiers, known for their cold discipline, looked unsettled. They were creatures who respected raw power, not speed they could barely see. The sight of a tiny human girl using an old sword to cut something their own weapon struggled to damage did not fit into any rule they knew. Far behind the crowd, a few humans who lived on the station exchanged uncertain glances. Most of them had seen Aiko before, but they had never seen her step into the center of a field filled with alien warriors. They knew she trained often in a small, quiet corner of the station gym. She always used wooden practice swords, always moved with slow control, and always bowed before and after each training set, even when no one else was around. They thought she was strange, but harmless. Now they weren't sure what to think. Aiko did not care about the attention. She held the katana with both hands, checking the blade with calm eyes. She ran her thumb lightly along the edge, not touching the sharp part, only making sure the metal had not been damaged. It was still flawless. She placed it gently by her side and breathed slowly, exactly as her grandfather had taught her. She remembered his voice clearly. Calm is your first strength. Control is your second. Skill is your third. A blade without these is just metal. He used to repeat those words every morning. He trained her not because he wanted her to fight, but because he believed she should understand her own mind. He believed understanding yourself was the strongest shield a person could carry. Her grandfather had passed away a year earlier. Aiko had not cried at the funeral, but she spent an entire night practicing every movement he had ever shown her, refusing to sleep until she could feel his voice guiding her again. She did not think about those memories now. They lived inside her, shaping how she walked, how she breathed, how she held the blade. The Krafton leader finally moved, his heavy armor creaking as he stepped toward her. He was almost slow, as if his mind needed extra time to accept reality. When he reached the center again, he turned to his soldiers. "Bring something harder," he ordered, and his voice shook with frustration. Several warriors hurried to obey. They returned carrying a thick slab of military-grade alloy, dark and reinforced with internal fibers. It was the kind of material used for impact shields on scouting vehicles. Normally, soldiers used plasma cutters to slice it. The idea of a thin sword cutting through it was laughable. The leader planted the slab upright in the ground. He stared down at Aiko and said, "Strike this. If your blade destroys it, we will continue. If your blade breaks, this farce ends." Aiko stepped forward, her expression unchanged. She felt the weight of many eyes on her. She heard alien murmurs. But she heard her grandfather more clearly than all of them. Calm. Control. Skill. She lifted the katana again. Her small hands gripped the handle perfectly, firm but relaxed. She studied the alloy slab for a moment, then shifted her stance just a little. It was almost impossible for the watching crowd to notice how precise her foot placement was, how evenly her shoulders aligned. Then she moved. Again, the motion was so quick that it looked like she simply disappeared and reappeared on the other side of the slab. For one long second, nothing changed. Then the alloy split into two clean pieces. This time the reaction was not silence. The field erupted with shouts, gasps, and even cries of disbelief. A few smaller alien species backed away, as if afraid they had just witnessed a dangerous force. One Krafton soldier stared at the cut edge of the slab and touched it with a shaking hand. It was smooth. Too smooth. It should not have been possible. Aiko stepped back and bowed once again. The leader's pride cracked further. He did not want to admit it, but his soldiers could see the struggle on his face. The girl had humiliated their tests twice, without showing any strain. And something about her calm eyes bothered him. They held no arrogance, no triumph. She did not look like someone showing off. She looked like someone teaching. That made the humiliation worse. "You?" he growled quietly. "Who trained you? What human weapon school teaches a child like this?" Aiko answered softly, "My grandfather." One of the aliens scoffed. "One old man taught you to cut through alloy?" "No," Aiko said. "He taught me to understand myself. The blade only follows what I understand." Her words confused nearly everyone, but a few humans in the back understood perfectly. Aiko did not need strength. She did not need size. She did not even need age. She had discipline, and discipline made her dangerous. The Krafton leader stepped closer, towering over her like a metal tower ready to fall. "If you think this proves anything, human child, you are very mistaken. Strength is not tricks. Strength is not speed. Strength is not cutting objects. Strength is domination in battle." Aiko looked up at him, her expression still gentle. Then choose a test that shows battle, she said. Her words spread through the crowd like a spark dropped in dry grass. Some aliens cheered. Some laughed nervously. Some whispered in disbelief. The leader's eyes burned behind his helmet. He pointed to his soldiers. Bring the combat drone. This time, even the humans watching felt their stomachs sink. Aiko stood still, holding her grandfather's blade, waiting. She had already decided. She would not step back. She would not dishonor the lessons she carried inside her. Whatever came next, she would face it with calm, control, and skill. The combat drone arrived with heavy metallic steps that echoed across the quiet field. It was taller than any human, built of dark armor plates shaped for efficiency rather than beauty. Its limbs were jointed with precision gears, and a glowing strip of red light ran across its head like an unblinking eye. Designed for war, the drone normally trained against adult soldiers wearing full protection. Anyone hit by it, without armor, would be broken. A child facing it would be unthinkable. Yet Aiko stood calmly, her small hand steady on the katana. She did not flinch when the drone's systems activated with a low hum. She watched it the same way she had watched the alloy slab and the pole before that. Quietly. Patiently. Almost gently. A Krafton soldier pressed several buttons on his wrist panel. Drone set to training mode, maximum challenge. A moment later, the red light on the drone's head brightened, and its arms lifted into a ready stance. This was not a toy training bot. This was a machine meant to pressure even strong warriors, using heavy strikes, fast movements, and unpredictable attacks. A few humans in the crowd shouted warnings. One tried to rush forward, but alien soldiers blocked his way. The Krafton leader raised a hand for silence. Aiko listened to none of it. She breathed in once, slowly, as if steadying herself before stepping into a quiet garden instead of a battlefield. The drone moved first. It lunged with terrifying speed, faster than most untrained humans could even follow with their eyes. Its fist cut through the air like a cannonball, aimed straight at Aiko's head. She wasn't there. Her body shifted half a step sideways, her movement soft and smooth. The drone's punch slammed into the ground, cracking the surface. Before it recovered, she stepped lightly across its arm, using its own momentum to glide to the other side. The crowd gasped. The drone recalibrated instantly. It launched 2 quick strikes, then a sweeping kick meant to knock her off her feet. Sparks flew as its feet scraped the ground, but Aiko reacted with the kind of movement that felt more like drifting water than combat. She dodged each attack by the smallest possible distance, never wasting motion. The drone's arms cut through the air inches from her hair. The Krafton leader watched with narrowed eyes. Impossible, he muttered. No one moves like that. Aiko did not attack yet. She waited, feeling the rhythm of the machine. She watched the way its joints tightened, listened to the hum in its internal mechanisms, and studied the fractions of seconds between its movements. Her grandfather had always told her that every opponent revealed their truth through rhythm. Do not cut before you understand, he had said. The blade must follow the truth, not chase it. The drone swept its arm again, aiming to smash her into the ground. Dust exploded upward as its massive limb passed through empty space. Aiko had already stepped past it, her footwork almost delicate. Then she moved. Just one movement. The katana flashed, a single, tiny motion, barely visible. For a breath, nothing happened. Then a faint click sounded from deep inside the drone's arm. One by one, its armor plates separated. Not cut off, but sliced exactly along their weakest connections, joints, pivot slots, access seams. The arm fell apart. Gasps spread across the field. The drone staggered, confused by its own failing diagnostics. But before it could retreat, Aiko stepped forward again. The blade shimmered once more. Another cut, so fast the red light in the drone's head flickered as if stunned. Its leg joint split open. Its stabilizer cracked. The drone dropped to its knees, not from damage to its core but because Aiko had removed its ability to stand or fight without destroying a single vital part. She dismantled it the same way a craftsman might take apart a puzzle box, calmly, perfectly, and with full understanding of its structure. The crowd erupted in shouts and disbelief. One alien shouted that the drone must have malfunctioned. Another insisted the girl must be using hidden technology. But Aiko simply stood there, breathing steadily, lowering the blade as the broken drone collapsed with a heavy thud. The Krafton leader stared at the dismantled machine. He walked around it, checking the cuts himself. He touched the exposed inner components and pulled his hand away quickly. The slices were so precise they seemed unreal. He turned to Aiko. You took apart a combat drone in seconds. Aiko bowed lightly. It showed me its rhythm. Her answer made no sense to him. It made perfect sense to her. But humiliation burned inside the enormous alien's chest. He was a war champion. He had defeated strong foes across many systems. His people were known for their power, and yet here stood a small human child who moved like a whisper and cut through metal as if through soft air. He could not allow his soldiers to lose their pride. He would not allow a child to show them weakness. He stepped forward, armor clanking loudly. "Enough tests," he growled. "If you believe your blade teaches strength, then face a real warrior." A murmur swept through the crowd. Some aliens stepped back. Others leaned closer. The leader pointed to himself. "I will fight you. A duel. Strength against skill. Warrior against child. Let the entire station see the truth." Humans shouted in alarm. Some aliens cheered. Some watched in worried silence. Aiko looked up at the towering warrior, her eyes calm. She raised her katana. "I accept." The ground trembled under the heavy steps of the Kravton leader as he moved to the center of the training field. His armor plates locked into place with a sharp metallic hiss, sealing him inside a shell built for war. The deep red glow inside his helmet brightened, signaling full combat readiness. He wasn't coming forward for a demonstration now. He wasn't mocking. He wasn't laughing. He was preparing for a real fight. Around him, soldiers from many species formed a wide circle. Some whispered that this had gone too far. Others leaned forward eagerly, hungry for the kind of clash that rarely happened outside live battle. Humans pressed against the back of the crowd, fear tightening their faces. The idea of an 11-year-old girl facing a veteran alien war champion felt unreal, like a scene from a legend, not something that should be happening on a quiet station training field. Aiko stepped into the circle without hesitation. She held the katana in both hands, its blade still clean and bright. Her face remained calm, but not blank. There was focus in her eyes. There was purpose. She breathed in slowly and let it out just as gently, grounding herself. Her grandfather's lessons echoed softly inside her mind. When you face a stronger opponent, don't show anger. Don't show fear. Show understanding. She kept her stance small, barely lowering her center of gravity. She looked like a child practicing in a schoolyard, not someone preparing to fight a huge armored alien warrior. But anyone who had watched her earlier knew better. The Kravton leader pointed his massive weapon at her. It was a heavy polearm, glowing with blue energy lines along its edges. A single strike from it could break stone. "You asked for a test of battle," he growled. "Now you will face real strength." Aiko answered softly, "I will face you with respect." Those simple words made several soldiers shift uncomfortably. The leader's armor tightened as if he were resisting the urge to roar. He launched forward. His first strike came down like a collapsing tower, a huge, heavy blow that tore the air apart as it fell toward Aiko's head. But she wasn't there. Her feet made a gentle whisper against the ground as she stepped aside. The polearm slammed into the floor with a thunderous crack, sending a sharp vibration through the earth. Aiko did not counter. She waited. The alien warrior twisted the polearm and swept the blade horizontally. The weapon hummed with energy, brighter than before. Again, she moved with small, precise steps. The blade passed so close to her that a strand of her hair fluttered from the displaced air, but she did not panic. The leader switched to heavy thrusts, stabbing with enough force to punch holes through metal. Aiko slid and turned, letting each attack pass in the smallest gap possible. Her dodges were so minimal they almost looked lazy, until a soldier looked closely and saw how perfectly measured they were. She wasn't avoiding the attacks by luck. She was reading them, feeling them, knowing exactly where to be. Still, Aiko did not strike back. The Kravton leader's frustration built quickly, and his movements became faster. His armor hissed as internal systems boosted his power. He swung, stabbed, swept, and smashed, but he hit nothing but air. The crowd grew silent. Not even the younger alien recruits dared whisper. They watched in disbelief as a war champion, respected across several systems, struggled to land a single hit on a small human child. Finally, the leader let out a growl that rattled inside his helmet. "Are you afraid to attack?" he demanded. Aiko shook her head gently. "I simply wait for the right moment." "And when will that moment come?" he snapped. "When you show me your truth." The giant alien roared and charged again. This time he used a technique meant to overwhelm, 3 attacks in different directions, one after the other, too fast for most trained fighters to read. But Aiko could see the pattern the moment he shifted his stance. She slipped past the first strike, leaned under the second, twisted just out of reach of the third, then stepped lightly behind him. And in that moment, she moved. The katana whispered. Just a single, clean cut. The aliens barely saw it. The leader felt something strike his armor, but it wasn't pain, it was shock, as his weapon fell from his grip. It hit the ground with a loud metallic clang and slid across the field. The leader stared down at his empty hands. Aiko had cut through the locking seals, slicing the weapon free without harming him. But she wasn't finished. She stepped back, lowered her blade, and waited again. The Krafton roared with fury and swung his armored fist. His punch carried the weight of a falling boulder, but Aiko slipped aside and tapped the edge of his wrist armor. A faint crack formed. She didn't break him. She didn't injure him. She only taught him. Every time he attacked, she found a single weakness in his armor, a seam that opened when he moved too aggressively, a small failure in balance. One gentle strike of her blade exposed it. Not a wound, just a truth. The crowd watched in awe as Aiko slowly dismantled the leader's pride piece by piece, blow by blow, without ever showing cruelty. The leader dropped to one knee, stunned, not by pain, but by realization. She could have cut him many times. She could have ended the fight whenever she wanted. But she had chosen restraint. Aiko stepped back, lowered her blade, and bowed deeply. "The blade is not for hurting," she said softly. "It is for understanding." And in front of every warrior on the field, the Krafton leader bowed his massive head to the ground. The silence that followed the Krafton leader's bow felt heavy, as if the air itself needed a moment to understand what had just happened. No one in the crowd moved. Even the buzzing lights overhead seemed to quiet down, dimming as if giving space to something sacred. The giant alien, feared across multiple worlds, knelt in front of a human child who barely stood as tall as his knee. It was a sight that no one there would ever forget. But the moment didn't last long. Pride, confusion, and disbelief rolled through the group of Krafton soldiers like a shockwave. Some of them stared at their leader as if he had betrayed their entire species. Others looked at Aiko with growing suspicion. A few stepped backward, not out of fear of her blade but because something about her calm presence unsettled their instincts. The Krafton were creatures of strength. They believed in brute force, armor, heavy weapons, and roaring victory. The idea that a child could defeat their leader by barely touching him was something their minds struggled to accept. It didn't fit their view of battle. It didn't fit their view of humans. It didn't fit their view of reality. The leader finally rose, slow and stiff. He did not look at Aiko right away. Instead, he scanned the faces of his own soldiers. Some warriors bowed their heads in quiet embarrassment. Others stood rigid, pretending not to feel the shame curling inside their chests. A few glared at Aiko as if she had stolen something from them. The leader saw all of it. He understood their frustration. He felt it too, heavy, painful, deep. But he also felt something else. A strange clarity. A kind of respect he had not felt in many years. He turned to Aiko and removed his helmet piece by piece. His face, gray-blue and scarred from countless battles, was exposed to the open air. His eyes, small and fierce, studied her like she was a puzzle he had never known existed. "You held back," he said quietly. Aiko lowered her gaze slightly. "Yes." "Why?" "Because you are not my enemy." A ripple of shock moved through the warriors. To them, fights were always about dominance. About victory. About proving strength. The idea that someone would hold back during a fight felt insulting. But the leader understood. He nodded slowly, the weight of his armor shifting with the motion. "You could have cut through my armor. You could have cut through me." Aiko's voice was soft but certain. "A blade should not take life unless there is no other path." The leader let the words settle inside him. He had spent years believing the opposite, that a blade existed to conquer, to destroy, to prove superiority. And yet this child stood here, stronger than him in every way that mattered, and she used her power to teach rather than harm. Before he could speak again, a sudden sharp voice burst through the quiet. "This is a trick." A Krafton soldier pushed forward, his armor clicking angrily. He towered over the humans nearby, who instinctively stepped back. His eyes burned with humiliation. "She used some human technology. A hidden field. A weapon we cannot see. This cannot be real." Several warriors murmured their agreement. The idea of defeat was bitter, and blaming trickery made it easier to swallow. Aiko didn't argue. She didn't defend herself. She only said, "If you believe so, test me yourself." The soldier snarled. "Gladly." But the leader lifted a heavy arm, stopping him. "You will not face her." The soldier turned to his commander, confused and angry. "She embarrassed us in front of the entire station. We cannot allow ignorance," the leader interrupted sharply. His voice rang across the field with authority. "You saw what she did. You saw the precision. You saw the discipline. If she wanted to kill me, I would not be standing here." The soldier clenched his fists. So we accept humiliation? We accept truth, the leader corrected. Even if it is uncomfortable. The soldier shook with frustration. But she is a child. The leader nodded slowly. And yet she has learned what many warriors never do. His words sank deep into the crowd, leaving them restless and unsure. This wasn't the ending they expected. They wanted a conclusion, something simple to understand, victory or defeat. But what Aiko offered was not simple. It was something that challenged their entire understanding of power. Aiko stepped forward slightly, as if sensing the tension inside the group. Her posture was still small, respectful. She didn't stand like a victor. She stood like a student ready to share a lesson. You think the blade is magic, she said quietly. But the blade is only metal. What matters is the person holding it. A few soldiers scoffed. Others listened. Aiko continued, her voice even and calm. When my grandfather trained me, he said the blade mirrors the heart. If your heart is wild, the blade will be wild. If your heart is angry, the blade will be angry. If your heart is calm, the blade will follow. The leader stared at her, realizing he had never once considered the heart behind a weapon, only the strength behind it. Aiko lifted the katana slightly, showing them the reflection across its surface. This blade is not strong because of metal. It is strong because of discipline. The soldier who had accused her took a step back. Not out of fear of the blade, out of fear of understanding. Aiko bowed again. The leader took a long breath. Then, in front of everyone, he placed one armored hand over his chest, the traditional Krafton gesture of deep respect. You taught me something today, young warrior. Aiko shook her head softly. I taught nothing. You were ready to learn. For the first time since the duel began, a few Krafton soldiers lowered their heads, not in shame, but in recognition. Aiko's truth had begun to reach them. But this moment was only the beginning. The lesson she carried would spread far beyond a single training field, and some would accept it, while others would reject it with dangerous pride. The field slowly shifted from stunned silence into a restless energy. Something important had happened, everyone knew it, but no one fully understood the weight of it yet. The fight was over, yet it felt like something larger had only just begun. Even species who had little interest in humans now stared at Aiko with strange expressions, as if trying to decide whether she was a threat, a mystery, or something else entirely. The Krafton leader remained where he stood. His hand, still pressed over his chest in a gesture of respect, fell back to his side. For a long moment, he simply looked at Aiko. There was no anger left in his eyes. Only thought. Deep, heavy, searching thought. Then he turned toward the crowd. You have all seen, he said, his voice echoing across the field, that my strength alone was not enough. That our tools, our training, our pride, none of it matched the discipline of this young human. His soldiers shifted uneasily. Admitting weakness did not come naturally to their kind. The leader continued, we are a warrior species. But we have mistaken force for mastery. Victory for wisdom. We have forgotten discipline. Some Krafton bowed their heads slightly. Others crossed their arms, stubborn and unyielding. A few glared at Aiko with smoldering resentment. They were not ready for this truth. Aiko watched all of them. She didn't smile. She didn't look proud. She only held the katana lightly, as if she were listening to the air itself. But the quiet didn't last. A low metallic hum rose from the back of the crowd, cutting through the uneasy calm. A Krafton soldier stepped forward, not one of the younger hotheads, but an older warrior whose armor was marked with countless battle scars. His face was pale gray, his eyes sharp and cold. He was known as Varkan, one of the deadliest fighters among the Krafton. Even their leader turned slightly at his approach. Varkan looked down at Aiko with eyes like sharpened stone. She humbled you, he said to the leader. You bow to her. You honor her. But I. He narrowed his gaze. I do not accept this. The leader stiffened. Varkan. You allowed a child to humiliate our people, Varkan said. His voice was calm, but the calm of a blade before it strikes. But I will not be shamed beside you. I will not bow to weakness disguised as wisdom. Aiko watched him quietly. Varkan stepped into the circle, his heavy boots pounding the ground. If this human believes discipline is stronger than strength, let her prove it again. Against me. The crowd murmured with growing alarm. This was different. The leader's duel had been a test. But Varkan's challenge carried a different energy, an edge sharpened by wounded pride and a desire for absolute dominance. The leader raised his hand. Varkan, enough. The lesson is learned. We do not need. The lesson is not learned, Varkan snapped. Not by all. A heavy silence fell. Everyone understood what Varkan was really saying. Some Krafton had been touched by the leader's humility. Some had not. And if Varkan defeated Aiko, even by overwhelming force, those who resisted the lesson would celebrate it as proof that brute strength still ruled. Aiko sensed the shift. She sensed the danger, too. This fight would not be like the last. The leader stepped closer to her. "You owe him nothing," he said quietly. "You have already shown what you needed to show." Aiko shook her head gently. "I am not fighting for victory." The leader paused. "Then what?" Aiko looked at Varkan, her eyes calm and impossibly steady. "I am fighting so he can see himself." Varkan laughed, a harsh sound like grinding metal. "Enough words. Face me." He tapped something on the side of his armor, and blue energy flowed across his limbs. His speed and power would be enhanced, far beyond the leader's earlier level. The ground trembled under him. Aiko breathed in once. The duel began without warning. Varkan lunged forward faster than any human eye should be able to follow, his fist crashing downward like a meteor. Aiko barely moved aside, the force shaking the ground where she had stood. Before she could fully regain her footing, Varkan struck again, his movements wild but devastating. The crowd gasped at the sheer violence of it. Unlike the leader's disciplined attacks, Varkan was a storm, fueled by anger, shaped by ego. Aiko moved, but for the first time, even she felt the pressure. Varkan's strikes came too fast, too heavy, too relentless. She slipped under one blow, around another, but she was beginning to feel the wind of his power brushing her skin. Yet she did not counter. She didn't lift her blade. She watched. Varkan roared and smashed the ground again, sending a shockwave through the field. Aiko stumbled, just a fraction, but it was enough for him to grin with cruel satisfaction. "You are fast," he growled, "but not fast enough for a real warrior." Aiko steadied herself, breath soft. "You are not fighting me," she said. Varkan snarled. "What nonsense. You are fighting your own anger." Her voice struck harder than any blade. Varkan roared and charged again, swinging wildly, his blows fueled by everything Aiko refused to carry: rage, pride, and the fear of being seen. Aiko exhaled. Then the shift happened. She stopped moving back. Her stance lowered, barely. Her blade rose, quietly. As Varkan lunged with a killing force, Aiko stepped forward, turning the momentum against him. Her katana touched his armor only once. Just once. A clean, controlled strike. The blow didn't cut him. It cut the energy nodes on his armor, disabling his enhancements in a burst of flickering blue sparks. Varkan stumbled, shocked. "What?" Aiko slid behind him and tapped the side of his knee armor. It buckled. He dropped to one knee, screaming in frustration rather than pain. Aiko didn't strike again. She simply stood before him, the blade lowered. "Your anger made you blind," she said softly. "You fought nothing but your own shadow." Varkan tried to stand, shaking with fury, but his disabled armor wouldn't obey. The crowd watched in stunned silence. The Kravton leader stepped forward, voice heavy but firm. "Learn, Varkan. Or remain broken." Varkan looked up at Aiko, his rage collapsing into something more raw, something he had never allowed anyone to see. "Shame." Aiko bowed to him, the same respectful bow she had given the leader. Because she had not defeated him. She had revealed him. And for warriors like the Kravton, that truth was harder than any wound a blade could give. The energy across the training field changed in a way no one could describe. It wasn't loud. It wasn't chaotic. Instead, a heavy, thoughtful stillness settled over the crowd. Varkan remained on one knee, his breathing harsh through his malfunctioning armor. His eyes, small, fierce, and usually full of pride, now trembled with something purer and more painful. He wasn't defeated by the blade. He was defeated by what the blade had revealed. Aiko watched him with the same steady calm she had held from the beginning. She did not smile at her victory. She did not gloat. She simply stood with the katana lowered, its tip barely above the ground, as if honoring an opponent who had fought with everything he had. Varkan's fists clenched. He wanted to stand. He wanted to roar. He wanted to break something. But his body would not obey, and his anger no longer had a clear target. The fight had shown him things he didn't want to see, weaknesses he had buried under layers of violence and pride. The Kravton leader stepped toward him, each movement loud with his heavy armor. He stared down at Varkan for a long moment before speaking. "Do you understand now?" he asked. Varkan did not answer immediately. When his voice finally came, it was barely above a whisper. "I understand only humiliation." "No," the leader corrected. "You understand truth. And truth always feels like humiliation at first." Varkan looked at him with confusion. The idea that truth and shame were connected was foreign to him. His gaze drifted slowly to Aiko again. She met his eyes with a calmness that did not judge him. It unnerved him more than rage ever could. He struggled to his feet, forced to rely on his own strength now that his armor systems were disabled. When he stood upright, he looked down at Aiko without anger for the first time. How? He asked, voice tight. How do you fight without rage? Without power? Without this? He gestured to his broad chest, his heavy arms, his entire massive frame. Aiko lifted her blade and touched the flat side gently. This blade does not grow stronger from my anger, she said. It grows stronger when I am calm. Varkan shook his head slowly. Calm is weakness. Aiko considered him for a moment. Calm is clarity, she said. You cannot cut what you cannot see. Varkan opened his mouth to argue, but no words came. He had thrown everything he had at her, speed, strength, power, rage, and none of it had touched her. She had seen every move, every flaw, every place where his anger clouded his judgment. For the first time in his life, Varkan wondered if rage had been a weight around his neck rather than a weapon in his hands. The crowd shifted as whispers ran through different groups. Even aliens who knew nothing of swords or human martial arts could feel that something rare had happened. Something important. Not a battle. Not a victory. A moment of understanding spreading like ripples in still water. The Kravton leader placed one heavy hand on Varkan's shoulder. You face the truth, he said. Few warriors ever do. Varkan's jaw tightened. He swallowed hard. Then, in a movement that shocked even his own people, he bowed his head toward Aiko, not fully, but enough to show sincere respect. Aiko returned the gesture with a light bow in return. Varkan stepped back and joined the other soldiers, quieter than he had ever been. The leader then turned to the crowd as a whole. This human child has shown us something our battles never taught. Strength without discipline is easy. Strength with discipline is rare. His voice carried across the field like a steady drumbeat. We must seek the rare. Those words struck the warriors deeply. Some Kravton bowed their heads. Others placed a hand over their chest, the gesture of respect that few of them offered lightly. A few, stubborn and prideful, looked away, but even they did not speak out again. As the energy around them shifted toward understanding, something unexpected happened. A smaller alien species stepped forward, the Telnari, thin and delicate but known for their speed. Their representative bowed to Aiko. Teach us, he said softly. Another species stepped out next, the Rural, heavily armored like living stone. They bowed too. Teach us. Then a Zalkani soldier, tall and insect-like, approached. Your blade shows balance, they said. Teach us. One by one, warriors of different species stepped toward her. What had begun as mockery now bent toward respect. Not because she had won a fight, but because she had shown them something beyond strength. Aiko's cheeks flushed faintly, the first sign of emotion she had shown for a long time. I am only a student, she said softly. I can only teach what my grandfather taught me. The Kravton leader knelt before her, this time on both knees. Unarmored. Unafraid. Then let us be your students, he said. A quiet hush fell over the entire field. Even the station lights dimmed, as if the space itself bowed to the moment. Aiko looked around the circle of warriors. She saw confusion in some faces, curiosity in others, but also hope. A hope for something different, something better than brute force and endless fighting. I will teach anyone who wants to learn, she said. Not tricks. Not magic. Just focus, control, and respect. The leader nodded, rising to his full height again. Then tomorrow, at dawn, we will return. Aiko bowed once more, the katana gleaming softly as she lowered it. The warriors slowly dispersed, but the weight of what had begun lingered in the air. A child had done what battles could not, she had opened a door inside the hearts of those who thought they were unbreakable. And for the first time in many generations, the Kravton began to question what it truly meant to be strong. The training field emptied slowly, but the silence left behind felt louder than the noise of the duel. The scuffed ground, cracked from Varkan's furious strikes and the leader's earlier blows, looked like the aftermath of a storm. Aiko stood in the center of it all, her blade lowered, her breathing calm. The echoes of battle drifted away, replaced by the strange stillness that follows a truth too large to fit neatly into anyone's expectations. Varkan limped away with the help of two other soldiers. His armor wasn't damaged beyond repair, but something inside him had shifted in a way no tool could fix. Every step he took seemed to fight against old habits. Every slow breath felt like he was learning to breathe in a different world. He said nothing as he left, but just before passing the far gate, he paused and looked back at Aiko. His face showed no rage anymore. Only a question he wasn't ready to voice. Aiko bowed to him from afar, small but sincere. Varkan lowered his head slightly in acknowledgement before disappearing with the others. The Kravton leader turned toward her. Without his helmet, the scars across his face looked deeper, older, like chapters from wars no one else remembered. He studied Aiko as if trying to understand the shape of a lesson he had never been taught. But before he could speak, he noticed movement. Other soldiers gathered, not just Kravton this time. A slender figure stepped forward, a Telnari scout, delicate and fast, with thin transparent plating along their arms that shimmered in the station lights. Next came 2 Rural Guardians, heavy and stone-like, their footsteps rumbling softly. A few human technicians approached as well, hesitant but drawn in by something unexplainable. The leader raised an eyebrow, surprised. "What are you doing here?" The Telnari scout gave a short bow. "We wish to learn." A murmur rose among the soldiers. The Rural bowed next, slow and respectful. "We want to understand the blade's quiet." Another alien, tall and insect-like, clicked softly. "We saw discipline we do not know." Aiko blinked, unsure for the first time since she had stepped onto the training field. She had expected anger, judgment, maybe more challenges. But this wave of curiosity, felt heavier than any attack. "You all want to learn?" she asked gently. "Not all," a human voice said from the crowd. Aiko turned to see Commander Reyes, the human security head. He looked troubled. Some refused to accept what they saw today. They left the field before the duel ended. Aiko nodded. She had sensed their anger as they slipped away earlier, their frustration trailing behind them like shadows. The Kravton leader folded his arms, watching the mixed group gather. "Learning is voluntary," he said. "But refusing to learn is a choice that carries weight." He stepped toward Aiko and knelt, not from defeat, but from purpose. "If you will teach us, we will return at dawn." Aiko hesitated. She stared at the dozens of warriors gathering around her. Some eager. Some confused. Some humbled. Some afraid. She realized that whatever she did next would shape the relationship between humans and many species for years to come. Her fingers tightened around the katana's handle. She could feel her grandfather's quiet voice inside her memory, steadying her again. "When you teach," he had said once, "you do not pass on the blade. You pass on yourself." Aiko bowed deeply. "At dawn," she agreed. The warriors dispersed slowly, each with their own thoughts. Some carried new questions. Some carried hope. Some carried the fear of change. Even the ground beneath them felt different, as if the air itself had shifted into a new direction. As the field emptied, Aiko finally relaxed her posture. The adrenaline faded, leaving her limbs tired. She knelt, placing the katana carefully across her legs. For the first time since the duel began, her small body trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of what she had set in motion. A soft sound approached. She looked up and saw the Kravton leader standing over her again. He looked less like a towering warrior now and more like someone who had carried too many battles inside him. "You are calm," he said, "but you are not made of stone." Aiko lowered her gaze slightly. "No one is." He nodded thoughtfully. "You faced us without hesitation. But now the field is quiet, and you are only a child again." Aiko didn't deny it. Children can feel heavy things too. The leader let out a slow breath that seemed to come from somewhere deep. "You showed us something rare today. But there are others who will resist. Some of my kind do not want peace or discipline. They want to stay blind." Aiko looked up at him with steady eyes. "Then we must teach them to see." He gave a small, almost hidden smile. "At dawn, then." He walked away, leaving Aiko alone with her thoughts and the quiet hum of the station lights. When she finally stood, she saw something she had not expected. A small group of children, human, Telnari, and even one young Kravton, watched her from behind a cargo crate. Their eyes were wide with wonder, not fear. Aiko sheathed her blade and smiled gently. "Do you want to learn too?" All of them nodded at once. Aiko's heart warmed. She realized then that dawn training would not only change the warriors, it would change the future. Tomorrow, she would teach soldiers. But tonight, she would teach children. And sometimes, she thought, that was where true change began. When dawn arrived, the station's artificial lights dimmed to a soft, pale gold, an imitation sunrise created for those who missed the feeling of morning. The training field, usually empty at this hour, was already filled with figures standing in quiet expectation. Not just soldiers this time, but engineers, medics, custodians, traders, and even a few curious children who had slipped in before anyone could chase them away. Species of every shape and size stood together, watching the center of the field with eyes full of uncertainty. Aiko stepped forward slowly, the katana held at her side. Her steps were quiet, but every head turned toward her. No one spoke. No one laughed. Even those who remained skeptical kept their silence. Something about the small girl moving with calm certainty created a space where noise felt wrong. She stood in the center of the cracked ground. The thin scars left by yesterday's duels still remained, lines across the field like reminders of what she had survived. The Krafton leader approached next. He wore no helmet today, and no heavy shoulder plating. Instead, he had stripped his armor down to its basic plates, out of respect, or perhaps understanding. He bowed to Aiko, a gesture that caused murmurs among the crowd. "We are ready," he said. Aiko nodded. She didn't raise her sword yet. Instead, she looked at the assembled group with a soft gaze. "Before the blade," she said, "there must be stillness." Some of the Krafton frowned. Stillness was not something their culture valued. Strength came from movement, from strikes that shook the ground. But Aiko raised her hand gently and the entire field quieted even more. "Close your eyes," she said. Many hesitated, but one by one, they obeyed. Even the children followed her instruction without question. Aiko waited until the rustling stopped, until the entire field was breathing in the same slow rhythm. Then she continued. "Feel your feet on the ground," she said softly. "Feel how the ground supports you. Feel your center. Feel the weight of your body. Do not rush. Do not force. Just feel." Some aliens found the exercise strange. Some felt awkward. But as the seconds passed, something unusual happened. An undercurrent of calm began spreading through the crowd. A stillness that reached even those who believed they were incapable of quiet reflection. The Krafton leader opened his eyes briefly, surprised to find his hands no longer trembling with leftover anger. He closed them again.